Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 7th of January 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Crytek claiming that Warface will redefine the AAA free-to-play market. The voice of GLaDOS to be found in the new Pacific Rim movie trailer. The Awesome Games Done Quick charity marathon has begun. Activision 007 games have been pulled from digital distribution platforms, and Crytek considering other game genres for future titles. In an interview with VG247, the developers of Warface, that being Crytek Kiev, have spoken of Warface being a warning shot to the free-to-play market and claiming that they wish to get rid of the so-called long con of free-to-play games. According to producer Peter Holzapfel, they claim that the game will feature only cosmetic, aesthetic differentiators and convenience boosters. So in other words, skins, hats, and the ability to level up faster. However, according to him, the ecosystem for Western territories, bearing in mind that this game is very much a Russian release at the moment and has not been released for closed beta for the EU or the US, is still being tested. The contradiction in this interview comes in the fact that after saying that they're only looking for convenience boosters and aesthetic additions to your character, he also claims that any piece of equipment will be purchasable in-game with either in-game currency or real money. Now, last time I checked, that was exactly the same as most free-to-play games in the West, quite frankly. This is what really confuses me. I mean, the fact that the interview begins with them making a bold claim that it's a warning shot, they're attempting to redefine the AAA free-to-play market, and that they don't want gamers to get their fingers burnt by seemingly free games and their long con, and that they're only going to be monetizing the game with convenience boosters and aesthetic differentiators. Yeah, but selling the guns within the game is neither of those things. This is exactly the same thing that most free-to-play games do anyway. And the problem comes in when you purchase those items and they end up being better than the stuff that you have by default. And then that's where the buying power nonsense comes into play. That's when people start to accuse the game of being pay to win. So it's a really odd statement. I mean, I've heard a lot from Crytek recently. I think you've heard it reported on this show a number of times that they've certainly been very, very vocal about how they believe things should be. And yet it doesn't appear to me that Warface is actually backing up that opinion in any way, shape, or form. The fact of the matter is that purchasing weapons is extremely common, and pretty much every free-to-play shooter all the way to the very top with stuff like PlanetSide 2 and Team Fortress 2, Tribes, Blacklight Retribution, pretty much anything like that, they all work in the exact same way. And it's okay, assuming that you end up in a situation where there isn't one clearly better gun. Now, what I'm waiting for is for a company that says this to actually put their money where their mouth is and say, right, this game is truly free. Everything that you unlock in-game is just unlocked via in-game methods, and you can accelerate that pace. And by accelerate, I mean gather extra experience, not just sell the gun or the equipment straight away. Or you can buy aesthetic stuff like hats and masks and stuff like that, and that is it. That is the only monetization we do. Now, when I see a AAA shooter do that, then I will believe this whole hype about, we're different, guys. I mean, here's the thing. I don't have a problem with shooters actually doing this. This is fine. I'm not too concerned about it. If there's a gun I really, really want, I pay for it, and fine. I haven't paid $60 for the game. I paid $5 to $10 for this gun, and it definitely wasn't as good value, but at the end of the day, I've also got the rest of the game for free, so I view it as a way of supporting the dev and making sure that the business model continues, and of course allowing everyone else to play for free, because most of the time in a lot of these games, most people play for free, and it's the small minority that actually pay for stuff that actually keep things going. PlanetSide, I believe they said 90% of people didn't pay anything, and they were being subsidized by the 10% that did. So the only reason the game is able to exist is because of those 10%. The problem, of course, arises when you can buy a gun that's clearly better or an item that's clearly better, and as far as I'm concerned, every game, and that includes stuff like Blacklight, and this is one of the big mistakes they made, should have an item that is useful, or at least comparable, there by default. Now, the default gun and the default armor you get in Blacklight is actually very competitive. It's totally fine. You could definitely do a lot of damage with that thing. It's really, really good. However, there is this utility item slot that you actually get nothing in by default. So if you were to buy something, I bought Cloak for instance, or I could buy a Medi Injector or something like that, that is clearly an edge. It's not a big edge, but it is an edge, because the average player doesn't start with anything in that slot. It's the same notion as saying, well, if an average player didn't start with a grenade, and you were able to buy a concussion grenade or a flash grenade or whatever, then it would kind of suck for them. They should get a frag grenade as their default, and then if they want a different kind of grenade, either they level up and buy it with in-game currency, or they skip ahead. So, honestly, this doesn't sound like anything different whatsoever in terms of the business model. It's a lot of bluster and really nothing else. And to be fair, I'm fine with shooters continuing in this particular way, but I'm only going to play a limited number of them because, quite frankly, I simply do not have the time to grind up in every single game. And more often than not, the concern that I have is not that the free-to-play shooter has decent progression or whatever, it's that we don't seem to get any shooters that don't rely on progression at all anymore. And I don't know about you, but I like to be able to just jump into a shooter and have access to everything because I don't have 50 hours to unlock everything or whatever. And more often than not, you do get companies screwing up the balance. So we will wait and see, honestly. As the article very clearly stated, they're not entirely sure where they're going with the business model as of yet in the West, but it does very much sound like everything else. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but I wouldn't brag about being different when you're clearly not. In an interview with the Toronto Sun, Guillermo del Toro has indeed revealed what we all suspected, at least those of us that actually paid attention to the trailer, that the artificial voice in the startup sequence of the trailer to the upcoming robots fighting monsters movie Pacific Rim does in fact belong to the one and only GLaDOS. The first official trailer for the movie contained several lines by the voice actress Ellen McLean, very much in the style of GLaDOS, and by very much I mean, yeah, it was absolutely 110% GLaDOS without any question whatsoever. The interview also revealed that the specific modulation of the voice was very much for the trailer alone and will not necessarily be included in full in the movie. Del Toro is quoted as saying, "Look, there's no AI I'd rather have than GLaDOS, but McLean's voice in the movie, due in theaters in July 12th, plug, has been modulated a bit to be less similar to the distinctive tones of Portal's unforgettable antagonist. The filter we're using is slightly less GLaDOS, slightly. The one in the trailer, I wanted to be full-on GLaDOS, essentially as a nod to geek culture. It's also been confirmed that the cameo itself was very much Valve-approved." As much as I'd love to show you footage of the trailer in the background, knowing YouTube, I'd probably get a copyright claim, because whoop whoop, logic. So one way or the other, if you wish to go and check it out, there is a link in the description below this video. As to what the movie actually is, it appears to be giant robots controlled by some kind of neural network, and men in very, very silly white suits fighting a bunch of monsters that came up from the sea. As someone that very much enjoyed the old Godzilla movies back in the day, with my favorite, of course, being Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, or arguably Destroy All Monsters, that was pretty good too, I'm personally quite interested in seeing this movie. It looks ridiculous, and that's totally fine as far as I'm concerned, but I wouldn't necessarily expect anything particularly intelligent. You know what? That's not what I go to the cinema for most of the time, so yeah, rocket punching, cancelling the apocalypse, GLaDOS, big robots, yep, gimme. The Awesome Games Done Quick annual charity marathon has now begun once again and is of course hosted by the Speed Demos Archive. For those of you who don't know, the Speed Demos Archive is really what you would expect. It is a giant database of speedruns alongside videos and live streams which allow you to see some of the most famous games in the world beaten at the highest possible speed. The Awesome Games Done Quick Marathon supports charity and last year raised $149,000 for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. 2012's marathon started today and will be running for 7 days in total, and there is a full schedule available on their website, which includes some rather interesting looking games such as Dark Souls on PC, Grand Theft Auto 3, the Fallout games Shadow of the Colossus, and many, many more. I personally am very much looking forward to the Goof Troop played in co-op, which apparently has a record of 25 minutes. So that shouldn't take too long. But one way or the other, this is a really, really cool campaign. It's a great marathon. It's got an absolutely fantastic idea behind it, and I would really love it if you guys would actually go and check it out. If you think it's worthwhile to donate to, then by all means do just that. They have already, in the first day alone, raised over $27,000, so that's absolutely wonderful stuff. And hopefully we will get to see an even more successful marathon here in 2013. And even if you don't want to donate, go and support it anyway. Go and watch it. Make sure that that stream gets pushed up. As of the time of recording, this is currently on 21,000 concurrent viewers, which is really awesome over, of course, on Twitch TV. So do go and check them out. You're going to find some very interesting gameplay indeed by the looks of it. And I am very much looking forward to that Dark Souls playthrough. Several James Bond games published by Activision have been pulled from digital stores across the board in a rather odd move, considering that Activision held the James Bond 007 license and was expected to continue to produce games in the series until 2014. The recently released 007 Legends, as well as Quantum of Solace and James Bond Bloodstone, have been removed from Steam and are currently also unavailable on the Activision store, as well as Amazon and a wide variety of other platforms. However, it is reported that there are a limited number of stores that still have this game available, though that very well might not be for too much longer. This has sparked rumors that Activision has actually prematurely lost or sold off the license to the 007 franchise, which is certainly a very odd thing indeed, considering the success of the recently released Skyfall. 007 Legends developer Eurocom was hit with a slew of layoffs, which essentially gutted the company completely in November 2012, and it would appear that the popularity of the James Bond game series has been in significant decline, with neither Quantum of Solace, Bloodstone, or indeed 007 Legends actually getting good critical reception anywhere across the board. Indeed, 007 Legends was considered by many critics to actually be fairly awful. So, of course, the loss of that game on Steam is not exactly a big blow to anybody, but it would be interesting to see where this is going. Why has this happened? Currently, we don't know. It is, of course, entirely possible that Activision will be attempting to transfer or sell the license onto a different company, or that the original license holder has decided to revoke the license to Activision, possibly related to the poor performance of the previous 3 games. But this is little more than speculation at this point, because we simply do not have any information, and Activision has yet to comment on this particular situation. But if you want to get hold of Legend 007, well, you can't do that one anymore. And trust me, as far as I'm concerned, you have been done a great big favor. And finally, yet more Crytek information. Might as well call this show the Crytek patch. Crysis 4 is, of course, going to happen. This is something that we knew previously, but what we did not know was the possibility that it may very well not be a first-person shooter at all. Speaking to the website Dusty Cartridge, the Crytek studio producer Michael Elliott Reed discussed the fact that Crysis 4 may very well go in a different direction, claiming that Crysis was always intended to be a trilogy, and also indicating that they completely forgot about Warhead, because that would make 4 games, but hey, never mind. In the interview, Reed is quoted as saying, I think at this point I don't want to give anything away, but I think the Crysis franchise itself has life left in it. Whether it's in a different game type format, whether it's expanding upon this, it's hard to say. That's going to be up to the designers at the end of the day. He also went on to say, whether it's FPS or not, I have no idea, but there's definitely a future in the franchise. The question, I suppose, is what kind of future are we looking at here? It seems fairly unlikely that Crytek would stray too far from the FPS mold when it comes to Crysis. This is not exactly a universe that would really open itself up to anything that wasn't either a first or third person shooter. I would imagine that there are certainly many possibilities for sandboxy elements, as well as Far Cry 3 style crafting, hunting, and an economy system. I would imagine that is feasible, considering that's not too far from what the original Crysis and, of course, Far Cry provided in the first place. A third-person shooter is a possibility, but that just seems like it would be horribly dull in comparison to what Crysis offers. And then any other genre, to me, doesn't really make a huge degree of sense. And it seems more likely to me that anything they did with Crysis in future would most likely be aimed at the free-to-play market, since they expressed interest in developing nothing but that format in the future, and that it would be multiplayer orientated, something perhaps with co-op in mind, a combination of PvE and PvP combat, something that Warface already provides. So it seems like they're laying the framework down with that. It's hard really to read too much into this interview. It's always possible, of course, that Reed was dropping some juicy, if somewhat red herrings, so just bear that one in mind. Alright folks, that wraps us up for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Hopefully news this week is slightly more interesting than it's been so far. It seems like the games industry is very much trying to get out of its post-Christmas malaise. We'll see how that turns out for them, and hopefully it will be good. Otherwise, this show will be very short in the next few weeks. I'll see you next time.